Welcome to the 700 Club. As I lead this program, I want to explain to you what's been going on legally in relation to the Trump campaign so that you'll understand the game. You know, it was Shakespeare who had these lines: "The fault, dear Brutus, is not with the stars, but with ourselves." And the Trump legal team did not get engaged in the battle until it was too late. Now, most of us understand football, and assuming you've got a college team and you've got a referee who maybe mostly done high school games, and yet he's hoping to get his child into college and the team is opposing yours, okay? So you get call after call. That was pass interference, not called. His knee was down and he didn't score, not called. He was intercepted, but he fell down and he didn't hold the ball long enough, so it doesn't count. And you go down the line. Now, every time the coach could call for a recount, he can throw something down and say, wait a minute, I challenge that. And he has so many challenges, and then it's all over. But if a challenge is upheld, he can keep on challenging. Now, where do you challenge an election? Where do you go? Well, you go when the votes come in. You have them compared to the voter rolls. You can count the absentee ballots, and then you can compare them against the actual voter roll. Is there somebody in that group that's dead? Is there somebody in that group that lives in another county and it doesn't count as a citizen? And all these challenges can take place early, and they can be upheld. And you go to court if somebody objects, and you can get a ruling in your favor because you have right on your side. You have a right to examine those things, okay? Now, what did the Trump team do? They did none of that. Now, assuming your coach makes no complaint, asks for no overturned ruling, and then when the game is all over and the total has been posted, he says, I'd like you to change the score. And the people say, no, the game's over. You've lost. Mm-hmm. That's what we're dealing with here, folks. The Trump team is coming in too late, and they're trying to challenge stuff that's already there. Now, they might prevail. I mean, if they could get two states suing each other, on this, any pretense they want to, you can get it certified by the Supreme Court. I mean, so it's something like that. But it's going to be very, very hard to make a case because they waited too long. They weren't challenging when they could have challenged, just like the coach who doesn't challenge ever during the game, and then he says, okay, the game is over, my team has lost, but therefore I want to overturn the results. It's almost impossible to do, but it could be. It's not over yet. There's stuff going on in Georgia, and the president's going down there. But we'll talk more about why that Senate race is so vital. But that's the game, folks. And if I can use the term, the Trump legal team screwed up. They started too late. They didn't challenge when they could have. I hope that clarifies things.
Why do you think that happened? I mean,
well, they just didn't figure it was necessary. They thought it's an honest election. We'll just go down and take the results. Mm-hmm. But they should have known. They were warned already there was a possibility of fraud, and they could have, you know, if all these absentee ballots, they could have demanded that they come in and, all right, every one of them, here's a voter roll. Is this person on it? Is it dead? Is he or she a citizen in the county involved, et cetera, et cetera? They could have challenged every single one of them, and they could have demanded that their poll watchers come in wherever they want. But they didn't do that because they figured, well, okay, Trump's way ahead. We've got it made. Well, did he win? Probably did. You could say, well, your team really won if it hadn't been for all those crooked calls. My team really won, but the score that goes in is the fact that your team lost. Bottom line. But more is coming, and we're going to talk about the Senate down in Georgia because that is so crucial, and we'll talk about that later. But now shifting, Christmas could come early for Americans suffering with the coronavirus. 2 vaccines are expecting to begin shipping this month. And the FDA could give Pfizer the green light for emergency use after September 10th. So how long before a vaccine is available? CBN's Jenna Browder has the answer.
From production in Belgium to a storage facility in Michigan, Pfizer is getting ready to distribute its vaccine as soon as it gets the go-ahead, and that could be in just a matter of days. This as Moderna also seeks FDA emergency authorization.
I say that by January, we'll have 40 million doses to distribute across the country.
All eyes are on the FDA, which could give Pfizer the green light for emergency use after December 10th, and Moderna after a hearing on December 17th.
We've been clear about the fact we're not going to cut corners, and the authorization process, although expedited, has very similar criteria to what we would use for the regular approval of a vaccine.
Right. Moderna reporting some impressive numbers with its vaccine, 94% effective and 100% effective against extreme cases.
This is something that can be trusted and will be safe for them and their families and can save potentially hundreds of thousands of lives.
Healthcare workers and other first responders could be the first to get the drug, but there's not enough for all of them. Today, a panel at the CDC will meet to vote on recommendations for who should get immunized first. But states will make the final decision. And for the rest of the nation, look to June.
100% of Americans that want the vaccine will have had the vaccine by that point in time.
All of this good news on vaccines comes as case numbers across the country continue to rise. Right now, 96,000 hospitalizations, that number nearly doubling since November 1st. And health officials warn of a possible post-Thanksgiving spike. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Jenna. Our medical reporter, Laurie Johnson, joins us now. Laurie, many people are afraid of taking a vaccine. Do you think we can trust this?
That's right, Pat. A lot of people are hearing contradictory messages and they don't know who to believe. But for Christians, perhaps the most reliable source is a man we just heard from, Dr. Francis Collins, for two reasons. Number one, as director of the National Institutes of Health, he knows as much about vaccines as anyone. Remember, the NIH helped develop the Moderna vaccine. But the second reason, Pat, is because Dr. Collins is a devout Christian. He loves the Lord Jesus with all of his heart. And Dr. Collins said these FDA-approved vaccines are trustworthy, they're safe, and they will save hundreds of thousands of lives. And for those of us who believe in the sanctity of all human life, that should really mean something. You know, Pat, I interviewed Dr. Collins earlier in the pandemic, and he strongly warned against believing a lot of these anti-vaccine messages that are all over the internet. You know, the internet can be a real cesspool of ideas. And just because somebody on a video says something that seems like it's true doesn't mean you should believe it.
Laurie, when do you think life is going to get back to normal, assuming we get the vaccine? How long will it take?
Scientists say that when we achieve herd immunity, then life will go back to normal. So herd immunity is when 70% of the population is immune. There are two ways to develop immunity. Number one is to catch the virus and recover it, and the second is to become vaccinated. So far, Pat, about 10 to 15% of the population has recovered from the coronavirus, and according to a recent Gallup poll, about 58% of Americans say they intend to receive the vaccine. That's about 70%.
And 70% doesn't. Well, let's hope the herd gets it. Well, hey, are you taking it, by the way? You're not in the at-risk group.
Actually, I sort of am in an at-risk group. I'm considered an essential personnel, and journalists are considered essential personnel. So they're in the top tier of people, but there are only about 20 million people who can be vaccinated in the month of December, maybe 25 million people. And so the most at-risk people are probably those frontline healthcare workers, and then some of these senior citizens who are in assisted living centers and nursing homes. And then beyond that, we're talking about 50 million to 100 million people who are high risk.
Well, I certainly will put you at the top of the line as essential. All right. Well, in other news, President Trump continues his legal battle in several states. But could the fight in Georgia actually hurt the Republican Party? John Jessup has that.
Thanks, Pat. Two crucial states certified their election results Monday. Arizona and Wisconsin both officially declaring Joe Biden the winner. In Arizona, the margin, just a little over 10,000 votes. A Trump-funded partial recount of $3 million in Wisconsin found more votes for Biden. The Trump team is considering legal action in those states. Meanwhile, the president is still fighting in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, and Georgia. In Georgia, Republican officials fear the president's claims of a rigged election will keep voters from turning out in two crucial upcoming Senate elections. GOP Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel encouraging voters there to keep the faith.
How are we going to give money and work when it's already decided?
It's not decided. This is the key.
No.
It's not decided. If you lose your faith and you don't vote and people walk away, that will decide it.
Georgia's two runoff elections will decide the balance of power in the Senate. Pat, Republicans currently hold 50 seats with 51 needed to keep control.
Well, what will happen, folks, if they lose 2 seats in Georgia, then it's a tie, and when they meet together, then Kamala Harris, as vice president, will be the presiding officer, and she will have the deciding vote. And now you're looking at a flood of appointees, the possibility of packing the Supreme Court, and all of the nominees for the various jobs, despite their radical points of view, they'll all be put in and approved by the Senate. It's advice and consent of the Senate. And in many of these things, if you don't have a filibuster, and that means Kamala Harris is the deciding vote, unless they could pull a couple of Democrats over. That's why these 2 seats in Georgia are so vital. The whole idea of packing the court, that was something that was set up, you know, it was called the nuclear option, and it was put into effect by the Democrat-controlled Senate. And the Republicans have used it to advantage to put a lot of judges on the courts. That will all be over if the Senate is now controlled by somebody else. Just one of those seats, and the Republicans hold it, but it is so vital. I mean, this vote in Georgia is crucial. The president's going down there to campaign, and we would just hope that he will not say anything unkind about the Republican governor, the Republican attorney general, the Republican secretary of state, and so they're all GOP people, and it's absolutely important that the Senate stay in the hands of the Republicans. And even the stock market would prefer a divided government. John?
Pat, and speaking of the strategic role of the Senate, a GOP-controlled Senate would likely make trouble for at least one of Joe Biden's potential nominees. Republicans say Neera Tanden is too partisan, and that could cause trouble for her confirmation as head of the Office of Management and Budget. Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn accused her of making, quote, combative and insulting comments about many members of the Senate, he went on to say, mainly on our side of the aisle. She is also accused GOP senators of enabling President Trump. In March, tweeting of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, I'm glad McConnell is fiddling while the markets burn. Tanden is head of the Center for American Progress, a left-leaning think tank. She's also a longtime ally of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Tanden is also unpopular with some progressives in the Democratic Party for what they call her centrist positions. Well, Joe Biden made a surprise move in naming former Secretary of State John Kerry as a special envoy for climate. Advocates of the Green New Deal claim Biden has a mandate to make climate a #1 priority. CBN's Paul Strand explains why some believe the American people may not share that view.
Climate change activists claim voters have backed plans for radical action.
On a visionary, absolutely unprecedented $2 trillion plan.
But new polling indicates most Americans aren't that worried about the climate issue. James Taylor of the conservative Heartland Institute.
When Joe Biden says that he has a mandate now to aggressively act on climate change, it's simply not true.
Putting a dollar figure on their feelings, Americans in an Associated Press poll show how little they're willing to pay to cut carbon emissions.
Just barely, a majority said they would pay $1 per month. When it came to $10 per month, Not even close. 3 out of 4 said they won't do it.
So what might Americans be forced to pay if an aggressive climate agenda is pursued?
Joe Biden says that he will invest $2 trillion in that. That is $20,000 per household.
And Taylor accuses Biden and his allies of lowballing what various analysts figure the real tab would be.
$10 trillion, which is $100,000 per household.
Climate activists and their allies warn Americans have to count the cost of not having something like the Green New Deal.
The planet is dangerously warming, and there are no emergency rooms for planets.
Fires have been burning up the west coast of the United States of America. Droughts increasingly have been leading to food and water insecurity. Hurricanes are proliferating.
They argue the damage from an unchecked climate by the end of this century will be shaving anywhere from 4 to 10% off America's annual gross domestic product. In other words, trillions of dollars. But is there a chance Americans could keep a major new government project out of the equation?
America has reduced its emissions more than any other nation in the world throughout this century. In fact, our emissions are now down to 1992 levels.
The Biden-Harris team have also said they want to get the U.S. right back into the Paris Climate Accord. But opponents point out that'll force unbelievably large cash contributions from an America already doing so much to battle carbon emissions, while the real polluters like China and India do little. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. Joe Biden elevating John Kerry to a cabinet-level position. Pat?
You know, if we really wanted to do something about climate, what we would do would be to plant a whole bunch of trees in the Sahel over in Africa, because it's that well, the emissions out of the Sahara, the Sahel, are one of the main problems in climate change. That's Africa. They're going to go to Africa, and if they planted some trees, it would be one thing. To kill the American economy is something else, and I don't think Americans want that. They do away with oil, they do away with gas, and they do away with fracking, and suddenly we are dependent on other nations for our energy. And when it gets cold at night and you haven't got any heating, then you begin to think, I don't really care for this Green New Deal.